Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hypnovision. I am your host, Nicholas, and this evening I thought I would talk about thought transmission and also directed energy. And guys, just so you know, everything I do is handwritten. And I just came out of a meditation session just a few minutes ago and started writing. I wrote like 3 pages. So I just wanted to get on video, do this a little bit different. I don't have my studio software in front of me, so I am recording directly to my phone. Thought transmission is an interesting thing, and when I stumbled across it personally, it sent me into a deep whirlwind because this is something that I never really considered. And if you had asked me about it a couple years ago, I probably would have wrote it off. So thought transmission can be a conscious thing or it can happen unconsciously. So have you ever thought about somebody and then they called you? Most of the time we don't give it much of a second thought. And that is the topic of today. When it comes to thoughts and attention, we are often too distracted by the outside world. And if we rarely get a chance to sit down and unpack our mind, so to speak, then we end up with a mind fool. If you haven't ever heard of this before, then researching mindfulness might be of interest to you. Excuse me. So mindfulness is a process totally separate from the topic of this video, but it does fit in quite nicely here. This is the part where the rest of the video does become more of a personal testimony because I've found throughout life it's better to just share your experience and not ever try to really give advice to people, because if you give advice to somebody and they take that advice, you don't know how they are going to act once they have gone out and executed this advice or taking your advice, and then something blows up in their face, then they turn around and blame you. However, if you advise somebody something that you went through, something that you personally experienced, and they take that knowledge and they act accordingly with it, then however they act is on them. So becoming a witness and observing things instead of trying to control and tell people what to do is a part of the thought patterns that go into thought transmission. And I will go into that a little bit deeper here. So I ask you to listen and keep a mind open for clarity, and also let your imagination guide you for internal self-understanding. I'm going to branch off and talk about Nikola Tesla, and I'm going to tie this back into my experience. Nikola Tesla is known for many things, and one of those things was directed energy, specifically a directed energy weapon. There is much that we fully don't know about his inventions, but we do know he was a genius. So we also know that Nikola Tesla worked on free energy and wireless transmission. Here's the interesting part. It all came from his imagination. Tesla was known to meditate. He was even quoted as saying that he spoke to God. But his character was often under attack, like he was some wacky mad scientist. And I think we know why. So I found myself wondering last year during one of my meditations, and I've actually felt myself drift off into these type wonderings, so to speak, curiosity. What might he have been envisioning in his imagination? And that's when things really started to click, like missing links. I started to understand things. One of the things that really became clear to me is emotion is energy in motion. And our aura and DNA are all parts of our electrical systems in the human body. So that is our nervous system, the fight or flight. So most people, when they get into a fight or flight scenario, they start acting in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, your attention to certain things kind of fades away because Survival mode means you need the basic necessities, security, a shelter, certain securities that make you feel safe. So survival mode engages a whole lower part of the mind, and your thoughts are not clear. And sometimes we can get stuck in that survival mode. As a matter of fact, we are going completely off script now. So when it comes to energy and emotions, it's like a Wi-Fi signal, so to speak. If you think about it, an aura of a human, it has an electrical field like static electricity. We know static electricity is real. We can observe it, although we can't see it. So this comes to like a multi-layer communication system for human beings, to be honest. And once you start to understand this, you start to have a better understanding of why things happen and the type of energy that people hold in their bodies and the imagination, the image of whatever it is that has, the best analogy I can come up with in this moment would be like a squid. So you startle a squid and it squirts out ink. So in my mind, I would envision that if we go through an event that supercharges our emotion, it couples them together. That creates a mental image that also has a expression of emotion that goes with it. So being sentimental, nostalgic, different things that you can have a smell that makes you think of a certain thing. There is an association within thoughts that can also invoke other senses within our body. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is it's not just internal. It is not just our firsthand experience. We are constantly affecting things around us with our other senses. Emotions is one of those that we often only focus on certain aspects instead of harmonizing with other aspects within our emotions. So I said this the other day, thought without emotion is cold and calculating. Now, I don't want to make that a blanket statement because I don't believe that that would apply to everything in general. But I think you understand what I mean when it comes to acting without thinking or reacting from an emotional state and then regretting it later. So there is a sense of imbalance in our emotions. So when something hits our aura, we get triggered and we respond in kind before we even stop and think and allow that to sink in and either decide to respond or not respond. But when it comes to thought transmission, the most interesting things that happened to me once I started to question things like, you know what, maybe, I thought about so-and-so and they called me. That is very interesting. I never really thought about that. And so I started to really, really focus my attention on that. And what I found was the mindset that I was in, and you would think certain thoughts and then something of the opposite would happen. Now, if you've ever been on this journey and you've gone through different YouTube videos, you'll see similarities in a lot of this stuff. Oh, I tried to manifest a person and the opposite happened. Well, that is also because of the emotional bandwidth, right? So when it comes to the chakra system, and I know that I'm getting kind of deep in all these different topics, but I've studied these topics for the last year. But within the emotional bandwidth in the chakra energy centers, there is input and output with the emotion. So the mindsets, being around other people that are in similar mindsets would strike those different emotional chords is really the simple explanation to it. So you might be around some people that it is easy for you to have a conversation with that person as long as you're talking about somebody else. But when it comes to direct communication, there's really nothing to talk about because there is nothing there to talk about. So the like attracts like in that scenario to talk about somebody else. Now, it could be any topic, not just talking about somebody else, but there's this sense of it's either direct communication or you are both directing communication towards an object, a thing, a person, or something of the kind. So directed energy in that sense would also apply within unspoken verbal communication. And we know that people read body language, eye movement. There's all kinds of ways of trying to read a human being and decipher and discern and identify. But to be honest, the more you identify with things, the more there is to identify with. And this past year, I learned that because my whole self journey has been to really to know myself, but also to understand a lot of things in the outside world that just never made sense to me. People will tell you things and expect you to believe it as face value, and sometimes we can find ourselves to be really gullible and really naive in our own knowledge, thinking that we know everything, and because we have a college degree, that somehow we have reached the pinnacle of understanding of all things, and therefore we resent anybody that knows something that we don't know. And I personally have always taken the attitude that, if there's a topic that somebody's talking about around me and it's something that I'm interested in, I will research it. And but also on the flip side of that, I have felt myself at times where that's kind of frowned upon, because it's like the student can't show up the master, and I understand that very clearly. So that has been a learning curve for me to go through. And the whole thing about thought transmission that really made me go into deep thoughts for myself and to figure out how to decipher, is my imagination just being overactive? Are thought transmissions real? Am I the only one that is experiencing my reality and everything else is made up? Am I going crazy? Well, no, you're not going crazy, for one. For two, yes, your imagination can become overactive, but also your emotional state of being, which does strike those emotional chords I mentioned earlier. So when it comes to thinking thoughts of someone, or trying to manifest someone, or trying to telepathically send messages to someone, they can only receive said thoughts on whatever emotional bandwidth that they are open to. Likewise, whatever emotional bandwidth that you are in, you can only send signals out within those vibrations of that emotion. And that is my truthful testimony to how that works. You have the 7 chakra systems. You have the 7 hermetic laws. I suggest anybody watching this to really look up the hermetics. There's also the Rosicrucians. There's a lot of spiritual stuff that I feel like the mass public has not been made aware of, and it's not been educated. And that is part of the whole illusion of the modern society. We are disconnected from our emotions. We are disconnected from our spiritual self, and we are lost, quite literally, because we have gave in to the illusions of media, gave in to the illusions of reality TV show, and we are so disconnected from ourselves that when it comes to stuff like this, we will start to just write it off as hogwash, and we will believe what we see on the evening news and take it as absolute truth. So when it comes to sending somebody thoughts, if a person is fully open on all bandwidths, then perhaps they might pick up more than you know. So don't get yourself in a frenzy over that, because I also experienced that. Are my thoughts really private? If you go and start Googling stuff like that, you might put yourself in a panic. So the best thing to do is not to focus on stuff like that. If you're on a journey yourself, then make the journey positive. Focus on what you can learn for yourself. And as you start to understand your own emotional state of being and the different emotional bandwidths, you will also discover areas that need work, areas that need to have a release of that energetic binding, so to speak, or blockage or emotional trauma in the body. And that is a real thing. When you look at Reiki healing, for example, there's a lot of energy work that goes into the body to release certain things in these centers. And also, I want to add that the human body, the psyche, is a pattern recognition machine. I said this over a year ago, and it's not just patterns in people's behaviors. It is patterns within our own mental mind. It is patterns in nature. It is patterns in creation, patterns in our imagination, and also patterns within our own body. So that is the automatic functions, right, that our body does on a second hand, behind the scenes, right? Your heart is, you don't have to think about your heart beating. You don't have to think about breathing until you intentionally think about breathing. And that changeover happens when you take control of the breath. And that is something within meditation that you learn to master the body and get yourself into those states. Now, a lot of times, people will need guidance. They will need somebody that has more knowledge, but those people are actually seeking to know and understand these things. They are seeking information. So if they seek out somebody to help them, that is one thing. But if you have this type knowledge, you can't go around and force it onto people and expect them to just buy it. That is, in essence, a bit on the spiritual narcissistic side, or preying on somebody's will, or trying to force and bend their will to believe something that they maybe are not at the point in their life where it is meant for them to understand, or maybe they just aren't capable of understanding it. Who really knows? But when it comes to thoughts, whatever you think and really focus towards a person, I guarantee you, if they are consciously aware, they will pick up on it. It's like a spider web. The spider knows when something lands in this web because everything is connected. And on a subatomic level, the quantum level, energy is energy. It's all the same. It is the spirit that animates the energy within the body. And that is part of the alchemy process. Most people will freak out and start to think the worst about when they hear things like the occulted knowledge, occulted schools and stuff like that. I will say this: anything can be good or bad. Anything, depending on the intention of how the information is applied, can be good or bad. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. If you are in a suspicious mindset, and still have internal conflict, then you may become suspicious of people around you. And that's not a good place to be in, because that is an actual indication of something that's going on within your own psyche. And there's also psychic attacks, which would be the best example. I'll give two polar opposites, because one of the Hermetic laws is the law of polarity. So you could have a positive person send you warm, inviting, caring, and nurturing type thoughts. Now, this would be a person that would maybe either pray, or they would just sit still for a minute and intentionally, just the way you take over your breath and you intentionally think about breath, you would think about that person. And I am sending you warm, inviting thoughts. That is a pure intention to send good energy to somebody. Now, on the flip side, the unconscious part, that which is hidden from the first person view, So the unconscious part of myself, if I were brooding over something that happened, if I were upset at somebody for something they did, and I sat around just feeling angry and upset towards that person, quite literally, they could feel that presence on them. And my personal experience this last year was trying to decipher what is a directed thought, what is my thought, what are my thoughts, is this imagination, is this real? So it's a little bit of it all, to be honest. And it could drive some people quite literally into a being completely solitary, not wanting to speak to anybody. And I have personally experienced that. And I think in the spiritual sense, that's what they would call the dark night of the soul. And they often will say that you want to be alone, right? So there's a sense of once you awaken your mental psyche to certain things and certain aspects and certain doorways, and begin to understand these emotional bandwidths, you will find yourself not wanting to return to certain things, not wanting to go back to certain things, because the clarity that it has given you has revealed why certain things were happening. And it was a combination of emotions and mindsets. So no matter how you slice it, it is a personal self journey of discernment. And if you want to not experience things that you don't want, then don't focus on them. That is the best way to put it. And I know it's easier said than done, but that's what's got me through this past year is creating content. What's got me through this past year is working on my studio and focusing on my personal goals to better myself, become a better person, a better father, and not just that, but to really make the second half of my life count for something different than the first half. So with that said, guys, I said it earlier, I believe that thought transmission is real. However, a couple years ago, I didn't know nothing about it. But it does make a lot of sense because attention and emotions is like a pendulum. And there's the law of rhythm within the Hermetics, the law of correspondence. There is the law of vibration. And I'm sure I'm missing out on one. I don't have them in front of me at the moment. But personally, each one of those 7 laws is a lesson. Personally, law 7, the law of gender. That is important, and I want to touch on that because if we are viewing this and not internalizing it, what does it mean on a spiritual level? What does it mean on a soul level? Then you might not really grasp the full concept of the law of gender. This is an internal thing, internalized. So to really understand that, personally for me, it's almost like understanding what the Akashic Records is. How did I get here? Well, the earliest memory that any human being might even have, and this will explain where one of these theories came from, is the Big Bang. The moment that the egg and the sperm come together, there is that bang, that flash. And I'm sure that there are videos, because I've seen them, where they have recorded this in real time now. The moment that the egg and the sperm come together, there is a energetic release. And so the question then becomes, when does that become a human being? When does that begin to have conscious to it? And quite honestly, how far back can you remember to start with? What is your earliest memory? And most people have a lot of emotional blockages that prevents them from really um, getting outside of their body, so to speak, and getting into the spiritual self, to be able to go past and go through these blockages and to really unravel your own origin. Um, I've talked about this in another video. When we are carried in the womb for 9 months, we are literally surrounded by water, and water carries vibrational sounds quite well. And those sounds have patterns within them. So for 9 months, we are being programmed by the environment around us because our conscious is clean. We don't really start learning until we can see and start mimicking what it is we see. Everything up until that point of that starting to take over is fully automatic. A child, 6 weeks old, will cry to get food. It will cry to get attention. It will. So there are certain things it doesn't. At 6 weeks old, it's already breathing on its own. So don't tell me that there is not something behind the scenes that is making sure that all this stuff is operating and happening and functioning, and the baby's not thinking about this stuff. The baby doesn't worry about, am I going to have a bottle tomorrow? The baby doesn't think about what's happening next Tuesday, what's going on Thursday. Am I going to be able to make enough money? No, the child is just present. The child is just there. So yes, the law of vibration is a real thing. I made a video about that, and the Hermetics is something interesting to look at, but the stuff with Nikola Tesla has been really very enlightening to me. Wireless energy, we have Wi-Fi now, directed energy. And when I came across directed energy and thinking about attention, I redefined ADHD for myself. Now, I don't know about anybody else on the outside of me, but ADHD, I redefined it as directed attention, hyper directed attention. I can't remember. I have it wrote down around here somewhere. But the point is that when we accept things as truth, then we manifest it as real in our experience. So if you associate ADHD as a bad thing, then you will experience it as a bad thing. If you accept autism as a bad thing, quite literally, you will experience or observe it as a bad thing. On the flip side, if you can redefine it and turn it into a superpower, autism is really artistic. Maybe somebody is just more emotionally creative than they are verbal. Nikola Tesla was highly creative, but he was not known to be a social person. He was not in with the in crowd. He was an inventor that had a life mission, and that's the way I've really began to understand things now on a broader level. And with that, I want to say thank you to everybody that's out there watching and listening. This has definitely been a journey for me, getting over my own fears, getting in front of a camera, getting on a microphone. You would think that, if somebody's a DJ, they have no problem getting on a microphone. But let me tell you, for 20 years, I always get a little pre-event jitters. And that's because I care, but I also realize that there's a level of anxiety that comes with that. And I had to get to a place where I can manage that without any kind of medication, without any kind of ritual, so to speak, other than just breathing and knowing that as long as I don't focus on the wrong things, then everything is going to flow automatically. And with that, guys, I will see you on the next video.